Let's talk about the vast rainforests of Papua New Guinea. There is a massive battle being waged there right now. It's a story of chainsaws versus consent, and weirdly enough, it's being fought not with brute force, but with paperwork.
These Malaysians, they are greedy and selfish, just like what they are doing to our forest. They are getting timbers, logging, and all this. And what are they doing for us?
Malaysians are everywhere, cutting our forest.
There is a map of PNG that has logging concessions everywhere.
The Malaysians, all they need is the signature of the clan leader. That will open doors for them to bring all the machinery into the land, into the forest. Although the last remnants of natural rainforest is still intact, it is under threat from logging. FCA is a very quick way of grabbing land and grabbing resource in Papua New Guinea.
The Forest Clearance Authority, the arrangement is to clear fair forests for agricultural purposes. And this is unsustainable. And not only environmental damage, but social impacts as well.
Slave blood. Somos los slave blood. Mi plan no kami plan kami slave blood.
And this whole situation raises a really fundamental question. When a modern chainsaw, backed by a ton of foreign money, meets ancient customary law, who really gets to say they own the forest? To understand what's going on, we have to start with this grand paradox, a contradiction so perfect, you'd almost think someone designed it on purpose. Okay, get this. On one hand, Papua New Guinea has one of the strongest indigenous land rights systems on the entire planet. A staggering 97% of the land is legally owned by customary clans. It's written right into their constitution. But then, on the other hand, the exact same figure, 97%, of the permits to clear those very same forests are controlled by foreign companies, most of them linked to Malaysia. So, how is that even possible? That question is really the heart of our story today. This isn't just some dry economic puzzle. It's the story of a massive resource grab, one that was executed not with force, but with paper. So, how exactly was this heist pulled off? Well, it all comes down to finding and exploiting loopholes in the law. The key strategy actually has a formal name, jurisdictional arbitrage. It sounds really complex, but the idea is simple. If you want to do something that's heavily regulated, like logging, you just find a way to relabel it as something else, something with much weaker rules, like, say, agriculture. You're essentially shopping for the easiest jurisdiction, even if it's just on paper. And here's exactly how it works in practice. The official by-the-book path to log a forest requires a proper logging permit, and it's a 34-step marathon of oversight. It is designed to be difficult, but companies found a shortcut. By claiming they wanted to clear the forest for a farm, they could get what's called a Forest Clearing Authority, or an FCA. This permit, which is meant for agriculture, has a much, much lower regulatory bar. It's the perfect legal detour. And these FCAs weren't even the first tool they used. They're actually the successor to an even more notorious scheme, Special Agriculture and Business Leases, or SABs. Together, these two became the legal weapons for this massive land grab. The scale of the SABL scheme was just breathtaking. Between 2003 and 2011, 5.6 million hectares of customary land were leased away. That is an area that represents 12% of Papua New Guinea's entire landmass, all handed over under the guise of agricultural development. And look, this isn't just an accusation from activists. In 2013, Papua New Guinea's own government commission delivered a totally damning verdict. They found widespread fraud. They confirmed that most of these leases were unlawful, and they saw an almost complete absence of any genuine consent. The commission's conclusion was blunt. The entire scheme was just a front for logging. This brings us to the next obvious question. Who was behind this whole systematic operation? Well, the evidence points overwhelmingly in one direction, creating what some have started calling a quiet empire. This quote from Komiok Jo, an indigenous activist from Sarawak, Malaysia, is incredibly powerful. He's seeing this devastating history just repeat itself. He says he's angry to see the very same companies that destroyed the forests in his home country are now applying the exact same playbook in Papua New Guinea. And that really is the historical context. After decades of intensive logging left their own primary forests decimated, these Malaysian timber dynasties didn't just stop. They simply packed up their well-honed extraction model and moved it 2,400 kilometers east to one of the last great forest frontiers on Earth. And this control is highly concentrated. A small handful of powerful, family-linked corporate groups, many from Sarawak, now control these immense territories. We're talking about companies like Rimbunan Hijau, Giant Kingdom, and Samling, each controlling hundreds of thousands of hectares. This is not a diverse market, it's a quiet empire. This whole dynamic has been described as commercial neo-colonialism. It's a quiet empire, not built with armies, but through immense political influence, bribery, and the systematic capture of the very government institutions that are meant to protect the forests and their owners. So what is the true cost of this paperwork heist? Well, the impact is economic, it's environmental, and most profoundly, it is human. The economics are just staggering. A comprehensive analysis looked at where the money from these forests actually goes. Over a decade, the logging industry captured over half of the value. The PNG government took about 42%. And the customary landowners, the people who legally own 97% of the land, they received just 6.1%. That is 6 cents on the dollar for their own resources. The environmental cost is ongoing and it is immense. As of right now, there are 1.68 million hectares of pristine, intact forest under immediate threat from active Forest Clearing Authority licenses. That is an enormous carbon store and biodiversity hotspot that is on the chopping block. But the deepest cost is the human one. The official inquiry and reports from the field paint a really grim picture. Consent was often manufactured through forged signatures or straight-up lies. Landowners who resisted were met with police intimidation, sometimes even paid for by the companies themselves. The promised schools, roads, and clinics, they rarely ever appeared. Instead, communities were left with polluted rivers, collapsing fisheries, and deep social divisions. But the story doesn't end there. The same official reports that expose the problem also lay out a clear path for reclaiming the forest and restoring justice. The path forward is logical and direct. First, revoke all the unlawful leases based on the government's own 2013 findings. Second, repair the broken governance with transparency, things like public registries and independent verification of consent. Third, enforce accountability by making the countries that import this timber responsible for checking its legality. And finally, empower communities to manage their own forests, keeping the value local. Ultimately, the principle guiding these reforms has to be simple. The law, the paperwork, the permits, they have to be tools for justice. For far too long, they've been tools to create the very opposite. Which leaves us with a final, sobering reality. For now, in the forests of Papua New Guinea, the chainsaws are winning. Not because they are right, but because they've been empowered by a system that has been captured from within.